Welcome back, everyone, to OpenLine, our first live OpenLine in about a month. Very happy to have you on. Love talking politics. Plenty to talk about. President's trip is in the news. He is in South Korea right now. Is that right? And so what are you gleaning from that trip?
Well, it's clearly the trips seem to show a different type of Trump. I mean, he's very scripted. This is the teleprompter Trump. He's much more measured. The speeches he gives, the discussion of the North Korean threat, talking about the idea they should make a deal, this sort of thing. You don't get the Rocket Man rhetoric. You don't get the destruction sort of everything, this sort of thing. So it's clear that these foreign trips are allowing him to be more presidential in style. And it's also clear that some leaders for example, Japanese Prime Minister Abe certainly was determined to put on a good show for Trump and, you know, show a friendship and support and clearly wanting to court him. The South Korean leader also trying, even though he's had a little bit more distance from Trump, but also trying to make sure that this is seen as an important relationship. The big moment will come, of course, going to China. Trump has already hosted Xi Jinping in Mar-a-Lago, but he's going to China. China was a major subject of the campaign. He condemned China's trade practices, talked about designating them as a currency manipulator, and yet he's pulled back from that. He's talked about the importance of China to deal with North Korea. That actually will be an interesting dynamic to see whether anything comes directly out of that meeting.
So that will be the interesting thing when he goes to China.
I think that's, and then also he's going to meet with Vladimir Putin when he goes to Vietnam for the Asian summit. So that will also get some coverage and how that dynamic goes on, given the connection to the Russia issues.
He did appear to be more presidential,
right,
talking about he would like a dialogue with North Korea and no Rocket Man. How do you go from saying Rocket Man to saying let's have dialogue? I mean, it's amazing how these things...
There might be, I mean, to give him the benefit of the doubt, there might be this notion that you need to threaten in order to get their attention, and then you can talk dialogue. It's also, I mean, we know the president's impulsive. We know he likes using nicknames, coming up with them for his political opponents. The North Koreans call him a dotard. I mean, there's this sort of game going on. So a lot of that's there, but, you know, he has deliberately decided, it seems, to try and cool the rhetoric while there and try and encourage this notion that the United States is interested in some sort of a deal.
And do you think things go well in China? However you define go well. I mean, you hear that Europe is all upset about Trump as president and they're all concerned. Is it different in Asia? Is he more likely to find friends over there, or are they all just concerned about what's going on? I mean, what do you think?
I think they're more willing to probably deal with sort of the fact that he's a different type of American president than the Europeans, who have a certain expectation about how American presidents behave from the past history and from much closer interactions. I think they're probably far more willing. And the China thing is very interesting because China, obviously, economics makes a huge difference. So the idea of imposing tariffs, for example, on solar panels, that China has been leading the world in manufacturing, these sorts of things where Trump could really have a real impact on their economy, might encourage much more bargaining, much more of the art of the deal, maybe in China, than we see in Europe.
And if you put on your history and political science professor hat, which you have on, but where do you see our relationship with China going? And what do you see China being in 20 years? Are they more powerful than we are? Are we co-superpowers? Are we more powerful than they are? Where do you see our relationship with China going?
I think it's moving towards something akin to a sort of competitive rivalry. The question in my mind is whether China will serve as a sort of scary alternative to the United States in terms of moving closer toward more totalitarian control, in which case I think it could take on images of the Soviet Union, but in some ways a different type of Soviet Union from the Cold War, namely an economically much stronger power than the Soviet Union was, and a much greater weight in demographically and materially. Or if China itself also shows some elements of democratic or open civil society, in which case you would have two large powers, both of whom had strong economies, and who will be rivals on some issues, but cooperate on other issues. And the North Korean issue could be a really interesting one, because China could cooperate in terms of really dealing with the North Korean threat in a way that might make a relationship with the United States much easier. Then again, it could also use North Korea as a way to weaken the United States and to, in some ways, bog it down in military issues in that part of the world. So I think China is rising. China is coming back into the world in a way that it has been out of world politics for 100 more years during the time it suffered through imperialism and its own weakness, and now it's resuming its historically central role in the world.
A quarter of the world's population.
Yeah.
You know, it's enormous,
yeah,
and it can't be ignored. And when I grew up, obviously it was the USSR and the United States. They didn't like each other, and they were the two superpowers, and it felt like at the time, you know, about 50-50. Then obviously the United States took over. Now you have Russia. Where is Russia in there? I guess for my kids, or for 20 years from now, what do you think the world balance looks like? Are we losing some of our authority or not?
In ways we are, in the sense that other countries, of course, are rising and becoming stronger economically. Demographics do matter. China, India, these countries are going to be more significant economically and politically. Russia will continue to be important because Russia also has military power. Nuclear weapons, whatever one thinks of them, still have a real clout, and both Russia and the United States are still the dominant nuclear powers. China has not actually moved in that way, even though China militarily has grown stronger. It has not yet decided to move in a full-scale way to completely go to nuclear weapons and to compete in some ways on weapon systems with the United States. Nevertheless, I think what we're going to have is a much more what we call a multipolar world, with a lot of great powers who will have to work things out multilaterally. And in some ways, Trump's America First idea is not as irrelevant if one thinks of it in terms of each country following the national interest. There's going to be something of that. The question will be, can the countries also cooperate with each other when they have to?
Mel, are you there?
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Yes, my question is, does the gentleman see, from his political advantage, do you think our citizenry, the United States, is going more towards security or freedom? Because I can recall, I'm going to paraphrase Benjamin Franklin, but he said that those who prefer security and opt for security over freedom will neither have freedom nor deserve freedom. Now, that's a paraphrase from Benjamin Franklin, and yet,
right.
I'm just curious where we're going as a country, between, as the individual, in relation to the government.
Security or freedom?
That's a huge topic.
That is a big topic. That's an interesting question.
It's a huge question. And
we would cede our freedoms to be more secure. Right. The more scared we become, the more willing we may be to give up some of our freedoms.
And in some ways, there are some disturbing trends in the world in that you do have powers like China, Russia, Turkey, who have become now much more authoritarian, that there's a sort of rise of the strongman figures like Erdogan, Putin, Xi Jinping, and in a way democracy or democratic governments seem to be somewhat in retreat. This idea of security or freedom, I think, is an issue for the United States. People do want the fear of terrorism has provoked this idea that we should have stricter controls. We should not be as tolerant of immigrants, this sort of thing. So I do think that the challenges of the fears of terrorism has certainly led to a willingness to have the government have greater powers of surveillance, and our issues of privacy has certainly come into a matter of national debate, and that I think the odd thing is technology, the internet, all of these advances in technology have also given greater personal freedom in some ways too.
Right.
And so I think there's going to be an uneasy balance for years ahead. I don't know that we're going to completely be able to get that balance right. But I think it's more likely that we're going to be able to, I think, hold off the types of dictatorial or authoritarian issues that might come otherwise.
I hope that's right. I mean, certainly our second caller, Brian, said this will be our last presidential election. Our last presidential election. You don't see that.
No. I think we're likely to muddle along. I think that's one of the issues, I think, that is even in this presidency, which so many people feared, is what you do see is other institutions can stop the president if he does something that is not constitutional, his travel ban, this sort of thing. The courts can do that.
The check and balance.
Congress checks. The checks and balances still exist in the American system and to prevent power from becoming too concentrated.
All right, we'll take a break, come back, wrap everything up, take a break, be back right after this.